our show reel, but that's not working. So you'll have to imagine based on what you see here. This is a very wordy slide for anyone making a Bible. This is how not to do it. But just to give you a little bit of an insight into how TV distribution works. You guys, you have a show that you're working on or that you've finished. You want to sell that show internationally to try and recoup or to cover the costs of your production and then to make a profit. We work with a lot of really, really talented studios who don't necessarily have the skill set and have the contacts and have the connections to sell that show around the world. And that's where we come in. We're not a co-production partner. We are a seller. We're a sales agent. That's what we do. We are pure distribution. We want to leave the creative to the creatives, and we focus on what we do best. What else can I say here on what we do? Just a little bit about our process. We take care of everything. We would sign a distribution agreement with you guys. We market it for you to the buyers, to the broadcasters. We take charge of pitching, negotiation, contracting, delivering. We collect the payment at the end, and as part of our distribution agreement, we get a commission percentage at the end of that all, and we will pay you in royalties. With most agreements with broadcasters, you probably get paid in the first year. Should be like that. Some people will try and stretch that, but you should be trying to get 50% of the license fee up front and the rest of it eked out after 1 year into the license period. I'm going to cover now a little bit about the 9-step process. Looking around the room, I know there's quite a lot of first-timers here, so this is pretty basic for the more experienced people amongst you. This is going to be fairly straightforward, but it's going to go through step by step what we do, from taking your show to closing deals and getting it in front of the kids. Because making it is one thing, getting it seen is another thing, and that's our piece. So to start off with, you've got to start with a plan, and you've got to start with a strategy. And there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all approach to selling a kids show. You've got to have a strategy that suits each individual show. To give you one example, I'm going to mention a show of ours, Talking Tom. I don't know if any of you know this property, a huge gaming IP. Started out as those little apps that made the little cat talk. Really irritating. It's come a long way since then. There's now 2 live-action series, not live-action, 3D animated series. Talking Tom and Friends started in 2015 and is now on its 5th season. And launching this year, we've got Talking Tom and Friends Heroes, Suddenly Super. We have tried to tell them that name is too long, but what do we know? To give you an idea of the strategy for this show, Talking Tom, a huge brand and a huge IP. It's a commercial property. It's not educational. It is pure entertainment. We would do with this show what's called a top-down approach. The first guys we're approaching are the big global players, the big global SVODs, the big global pay TV players. That's who we're hitting first. Do you get one of those on board? Great, you've landed the biggest fish in the world. You don't get one of those on board, you drop down a level. On a more pan-regional level, you're talking maybe Warner EMEA, just across their European, Middle East, Africa feeds. You're talking maybe Jim Jam, you're talking Minimax, you're talking these guys on a more kind of, still a pan-regional scale, but on a smaller scale than the global scale. Drop down once more, and you're in the territory-by-territory approach. That's probably the most fun, really, for a seller, is putting together those pieces of the jigsaw, territory by territory, and finding the right partner in every territory is, for me, the most rewarding part of the whole job. Finding someone who matches the values of your show and where the audience is perfectly suited is a real joy. Then you come on to what's called windowing. I'm going to give the example of something like Mowgli is a show that is currently not on air in India, but we did a deal with Warner EMEA. They commissioned the program, got it made, and they took exclusive pay TV rights for 5 years across Europe, Middle East, Africa. What we do then is called a windowing strategy. I like to use the analogy I was telling Ken the other day of spinning plates. You've got your pay TV plate in the air on boomerang. What comes next? Normally, there'll be something called a holdback. On free TV, there'll be a holdback, say, for 12 months, 24 months. As soon as those rights become available, you want to get that plate in the air. You want to be talking to other partners and have that lined up so day one that it becomes available, you're ready to go and you're ready to get that plate in the air. You want to do the same thing with SVOD. And you build up this piece of the jigsaw, and this is in, say, one specific territory. You've got the pan-regional level with Boomerang, then, say, in Germany, you get a local broadcaster involved, you get ZDF, you get an SVOD involved, and all of a sudden then, you've got loads of eyeballs on your show, and it's not just, did it work on Boomerang? No. What happens then? You've now got so many other avenues, and they all feed each other. Say it didn't work amazingly on Boomerang, it might work amazingly on ZDF, and then you've got a second season. You've not put all your eggs in one basket. It used to be the case, maybe 5 years ago or something, a Netflix deal. They would take huge, huge swathes of rights. They take your show, and they kill it, because it doesn't work. They've taken up all the rights. You've got no opportunities to explore anything else. They stick it on their platform. They don't market it at all, because Netflix doesn't. They'll market a Stranger Things. They might market the new Heartstopper, but they're not going to market 99.9% of the shows they're picking up. They stick it on the platform. Nobody watches it. After a while, the algorithm stops recommending it to people, and it just falls into the back. And you'll never get a second season, because they've eaten up the rights for so long. Luckily, that is not so much the case anymore, but it's always something to be careful of. Particularly for you guys, you're going out there and you're trying to pitch your show and you're trying to get it made. It's hard, right? It's you're going to have the impulse to go with just the first offer and think, they want to make this show for me, they want to give me this and make it happen. You've got to protect it. It's such a risk to give everything to one partner, because you're just relying on it working. Like Ken was saying earlier, and he had this film that's just gone. So that is why we window. You have a question? Yeah?
Yeah, Toby, how does it make business sense for somebody like Netflix to kind of just not market anything in Distributor?
Because they don't need to. They're huge, and they've got their... They've paid enough money to acquire it, or they used to 5 years ago, not so much anymore. But basically, you know, they've got their evergreens, they've got the things that work consistently, they've got their huge shows. They don't need to market the next one, because they're just going to wait and see what happens. They're going to wait and see if people watch it, if people find it. If they do, maybe then they start to market it, maybe they market the second season. But a brand new thing, they're probably not going to touch. They're going to market the things that are really working, that they know, that's always going to work. Would be the answer to that. I know it feels counterproductive, but it's the way it works. With a show like I mentioned earlier, like Talking Tom and Friends, a huge piece of that is the licensing piece. Talking Tom is one of those brands that it's the perfect setup, right? It's the 360 experience. It's not just a show. It's a game. It's apps. It's a book. It's everything, and that's what you want, really. But with a piece like that, you need to make sure that you've got the right broadcasters to maximize the exposure and maximize the eyeballs, because the licensing piece comes all down to that. So we maybe, with Talking Tom, certainly for the original 3D animated series, Talking Tom and Friends, the strategy there was entirely non-exclusive. They were one of the first shows to launch on YouTube, build the audience there, and everyone that we layer up after that, in broadcaster-wise, in terms of SVODs and in terms of the other platforms, it's all non-exclusive. It's just maximizing the number of eyeballs, so that when the licensing piece comes in, they can go into each individual territory. You get your global master toy sales, and that all comes together, and that's really where the big cash is, to be honest. So that is kind of about that approach. The other one is the bottom-up approach. We've talked about some big commercial properties like Talking Tom. On the other end of that, you've got your nice, sweet, educational, soft, gentle shows. Like we've got one in our catalogue called Daisy and Ollie, which is an educational show about all the crazy questions that kids ask their parents every day. Every episode is a new question, like, why don't ducks wear raincoats? And through the story of the episode, you answer that question. This is not a big pay TV play. It's never going to be. This is a free TV show. This is a public broadcaster show. You've got to go straight away from that bottom down, territory by territory, and find the right partner. With those guys, it's not necessarily about the most entertaining show or the show that's going to knock everyone out of the park and the biggest ratings. With those guys, a lot of the time it's about what they think an audience should be watching, what they want to portray to the young people of today. The public broadcasters have a responsibility to kind of educate the youth and to create the society that they want to live in. So that's why we take that approach with those. So once you've got that strategy in place, then and only then do you start to move on. And then the next stage is your prep. We've talked a lot about Bibles over the course of these last 3 days, but it is probably the most crucial piece that needs to be right. And we won't take it to market until we're happy with the Bible. You might have 2, 3 different versions of a Bible. You might have a more in-depth Bible, which is what you send to broadcasters after the meeting, that goes into more detail, more characters, probably more wordy, there for the people who really want to dive in. But for a pitch, for when I'm taking it out to market, I want a Bible that is minimal words and super visual, super vibrant, but it's still got all the key things in there. You want a bang-in front cover, and then you want the next page to cover all the key information. What's the format? What's the age group? Any similarities? Any of those comp shows? Just that key overview. And your tagline, or your logline, which we've talked a lot about as well. After that, you want it to just be pretty much visuals. Here's this character, here's some of your backgrounds, because then it's our job as sellers to give the context and to give the information. So that takes a lot of work to get to that right point where you've got enough materials where you feel like, right, we can go into the market and we can make a big splash. Ken mentioned half-baked earlier. You cannot enter into the market with half a pitch because they will never want to look at that show ever again. You've got to go in and you've got to knock them out of the park. Early doors, because you very rarely get a second chance. If they've made up their mind straight away that, that idea is half-cooked, that's not for us. It's such a battle then to get them back on side. Unless they completely forget about it, you're off to a loser. As part of that as well, we want to get it in our screener room. If you've got screeners, if you've got an episode ready, that would be a big part of that. We want to get it in our catalogue. One sheet is much more of a thing in the past, but we would still have them on the stand at a market just for people to pick up and just to have that physical visual aid. Once we've got all that in place, we then look at the publicity piece. Normally, with any new show that we acquire, we want to launch it with a big splash at a specific market. The biggest markets in the world, you'd think Kidscreen, which is next week. You'd think Annecy, which I know a lot of you guys will be familiar with. MIPCOM is probably the biggest one of the year. If you can get it in time for MIPCOM, you're onto a winner. MIPTV, to a lesser degree, dying more and more every year. But that's where you want to launch your show. You want to do publicity around that event. You want to get in some of these magazines. You want to get in Kidscreen magazine. You want to get on C21. Make a big announcement that Jetpack has signed this show. You just want to kind of, I've written it there, generate interest and foster the curiosity. Make the buyers, because the buyers read all this stuff, all the literature the buyers do read. You want to get them thinking, oh, Jetpack's got a new show. What's that? Get them interested. Have a visual that they think, oh, I'm curious to know more. Get their attention. After that, and I'm going to show you a little bit of information here about what we would do to market a show. So you've got different things like different news stories that we put out with our marketing team. If we've done a lot of deals, for example, we would do a story about that. That can always help to generate interest in a show. It shows broadcasters that it's working, shows them who's picked it up, and it's a nice way to advertise your show without really kind of being so explicit about it. We've got our social media. We'd always stick it up on our Twitter accounts. We'd stick it up on our Instagram and on Facebook. We've also got our Jetpack podcast, which is quite a new endeavour, which we're lucky enough on our team to have a guy, Matt, who helps out on our acquisition side, who used to work in local radio. So he had the great idea to put together a podcast where every week he talks to one of our producers, he gets them on the podcast, and they talk about the show, and they talk about their inspirations, and they talk about the passion behind it. They essentially pitch the show on the podcast. And buyers can tune into that, have a listen, and it's a really kind of interesting way to get a show out there. And I don't think there's any other distributors doing that right now. Someone might correct me, but I don't think so. I think we were the first ones. What you've got as well is we put these little ads out, these little kind of, I don't know what the word is, I'm not in marketing, but at the side of screens, these little pop-ups on the Kids Screen website and things like that on C21 where it just flashes up, meet us here, this is our booth at Annecy, this is our booth at MIPCOM, come and meet us. That's pretty much that. What am I looking at here? Market presence. We want to make sure that all of your visuals, your gorgeous visuals, are front and center on our stand. You can see here, I don't know if you can see the mouse, but the one in the middle, that's our MIPCOM stand, and you can see round the edge, we feature all the latest characters that we've got in our slate and all the latest characters from our new shows. We do the same at Annecy, we do the same when we're at ATF on a smaller scale. It's just me who goes, so we don't need such a big stand. But that is just so that people come up and you can reference them, and it's eye-catching, and people come by the stand, and maybe you didn't even have a meeting, but something catches their eye, and they're in. And then you're into the pitch. You're at a market, and you're doing your direct meetings with buyers to pitch your show. You're happy, you've got your strategy, you know who your main targets are, you've got all your materials lined up, and you're in it. We will have poured over the pitch time and time again to get it right. My personal approach to it is possibly a little bit different to other people's. I don't like to have such a scripted, rigid way of going about it. I think learn everything there is to know about the show, know it inside out, and then let it be a conversation. You've got these half-hour meetings with buyers. They probably might have 60 meetings over the course of a single market. No one wants to sit there and just be lectured, right? Nobody wants it not to be a dialogue. Farnaz said, if anyone heard her talk on Monday, it was amazing, leave room for them to ask questions. I would agree with that, but also you need to be asking them questions. The first thing out of your mouth shouldn't be, here's my show, this is what I've got. You've got to know who you're talking to. You've got to understand the buyer. You've got to know if it's a channel, what do they show? What have they got on air? Is it a slot? Is it a dedicated kids channel? Know it inside out, because nothing will put a new buyer off if you're meeting them for the first time than thinking that you don't know who they are and you don't know what they do, and you're just bringing a show to them blindly. You need to justify why it's right. And bringing that piece up earlier of the comp shows, you need to bring up a show that they have already on air that is similar to that. Say, for example, we're selling the new Talking Tom. It's a 3D superhero upper preschool / bridge show. If they've got PJ Masks on air, bring that up straight away. You don't want to say it's the new PJ Masks. You don't want to say it's the same. The point then is to make that comparison and then say why it's different. PJ Masks is more action-oriented, whereas Talking Tom and Friends, we come at it for a much more comedic standpoint. The point is the comedy. The superheroes are not supposed to be amazing, saving the day. They're stupid. They're just learning their powers for the first time. Their kids have just found out they've got these amazing abilities, but they've got no idea how to use them, and that's where the comedy comes from. So you've got to make that, the comparison can be the starting point, but you've got to show them why it's different and why it fits on their channel. You've also got to know who you're talking to, and I think that's where you've got to kind of read the person. And are they the kind of person that wants a big, long spiel, a big, long pitch? Or are they the kind of person that kind of just wants the core information and then just wants to get to know you? Because a huge part of it is that as well. And this isn't just for me as a distributor talking. I'm trying to give sort of general advice as well, because you're going to be in front of distributors and you're going to be in front of broadcasters, and they don't just want to know about your show, they want to know about you. Particularly if they've never met you before because you're a first-timer. They need to know that you're somebody that they can work with. The reason that distributors get so much business is because we've got the precedent. We've done these deals with these same guys time and time again. They know that the process is going to be smooth. With you, you haven't got that benefit. You need to be easygoing. You need to show them that you're the kind of person that they can do business with. You need to find the hook, which is not such a straightforward thing, but it's that log line. It's what makes your show special, what makes it unique. Why is it different to every show that they've heard today? If I hear another group of friends go on adventures, then I don't know, that is every single log line ever. You need to do better than that. What is unique about yours? What is special? What is the passion behind it? That's what you need to get across in that 2-sentencer. That's why in Ken's workshops, you'll spend 3 days just talking about that, because if you don't catch them then, you're going to struggle to catch them in the rest of the pitch. So that is your initial conversation with your buyer. I mean, jump in if you have questions on kind of that. Otherwise, hold them for any point. Happy to answer at any point. After that comes the rubbish part, really. This is the bit where you've got to push. And this bit, there's no rules. This is the wasteland. This is, this is the tough bit. You've got to try and keep their interest if they were interested on that initial pitch. Think about it from their perspective. They've had so many pitch meetings. If we're saying 60 meetings, maybe every meeting has pitched them 4 shows. I can't do the maths that quickly, but it's a hell of a lot of shows. A big reason why you might not get an answer straight away is because they're inundated. There was a question on Monday of what does it mean when they're not getting back to me, and Farnhouse was saying if it's been a long time and you're not hearing anything, it's probably a no. I disagree with that. Maybe it's the seller in me that thinks if it's not a no, it must be a yes, or at least it's a maybe. But I don't think that. I think there's so many reasons why it's not now. And you've got to think about different things, like just something like budget. Do they have it right now? Are they in budget cycles? Do they have a specific term where they're available to buy budget? We were talking about the Italians the other day, and they only buy in December. So if you pitch them a show in February, they're probably just going to sit on it for a while. They're going to take their time. They're going to look at everything over the course of that year. And then when December rolls around and they've got a bit of cash in their pocket, they'll go and they'll think about what they had. But you've got to know these things. And you can ask those questions in the pitch. Don't be afraid to ask the buyers how they operate. Who is the team that's making the decision behind that? Don't be afraid to ask those questions. You don't have to stand on ceremony. You know, they'll be more than happy to give you that information because you've made that connection. So think about that as well. Chase smart. I've underlined smart to get that across. There's nothing worse than just coming in with, oh, just checking you got the last email. They got the last email. Don't do that. Chase smart. If you're going to chase them, which you always should, make sure you've got something new to add. It can be something as simple as, since I showed it to you, we've signed 5 broadcast deals. The momentum on this show is really taking off. Would be great to hear some feedback. Something like that. You've not just arbitrarily chased them. You've offered a little bit of something extra. It's always good to hold a little bit of something back as well. Maybe if your show is in production, you might just have 1 episode. Chase them with another episode. Always have that little bit of something extra to offer. Persevere and be patient is the obvious one. These things take a lot of time, and just within my own territories that I handle, you've got guys who they're one person responsible for deciding the entire slate, so it's just winning them over, and you've got other things where there's a whole team. They've got to take it away, they've got to pitch it internally. Maybe they've got to make the pitch internally to 4 different groups until they come back to you with an offer. And they're probably not keeping you updated during that process. They're probably not updating everyone to say, oh yeah, we've got an internal, blah, blah, blah. With the guys that you've got the really, really close relations with, whether you just drop them a message, then yeah, you can get that. But with the majority, you're probably not involved in that whole process. So it's just about being patient, being available for when they need, and persevering. I've put in there, dangle the carrot. And when I say that, I mean you can re-pitch the show, and you can push for feedback. The reason that we go to all the markets is because you need to keep seeing them. You need to see these people 2, 3, 4 times a year. Part of our strategy of always having something new for a market is to dangle the carrot. The broadcasters always want to see something new. They're obsessed with new. You don't want to give them the news straight away. Say you pitch something in April, it's now October, you've not heard back on that show that you pitched in April. So you say, just before I show you what's new, you're going to need to give me some feedback on this one. Did you watch an episode? You probably didn't. But at least it's back in their frame of mind, and they're back thinking about it. And that is part of the mission, just to keep planting it again and keep it in their thoughts. That's the carrot. The new show is the carrot. And they only get the carrot if they give you some feedback. So that is pretty much the pushing process, and that can take years. I can give you an example. Again, I keep bringing up the Italians, but there was a show that was pitched 6 years ago before I was even with Jetpack. I was selling non-fiction royal documentaries at the time that was pitched to write, and they absolutely loved it. I didn't do the deal with them until this year. And they were telling us for 6 years, oh, absolutely, it's so us. We absolutely love it. But it doesn't work out that way. Strategies change. They can love it. These two individuals that you pitched it to and you totally sold on it, they need to wait until the timing is right. That is a very extreme example, but, it happens. So you need to be patient and you need to be smart. And don't get frustrated and don't push too much. Don't get upset with them, because that is a surefire way to kill their interest. The next stage, the nice stage, but again, the tough stage. If you and the buyer have been matey-matey up to this point, this is the time to get a little bit tough. The negotiation phase. You've pushed and you've pushed and you've got yourself an offer. The advantage I mentioned earlier that we have a distributor is that we've probably got precedent with these people. We've done deals before, and the greatest negotiation tool at your disposal is precedent. Every broadcaster will probably make you a rubbish first offer. Even if you do 4 deals with them every year, every new offer will probably be rubbish. But then it's hard to come back to, well, for all these deals in the past, you paid this, you took these rights, what's different now? They haven't got an argument for that. So precedent is your best friend. The advantage of working with a distributor is that we know these guys and we know where we can push them. We see it so often where we sign a show and they may have done deals in their local territories, or maybe they've got a commissioning deal with a broadcaster, and we look at the deal and it's really rubbish. But that comes from the inexperience, and it comes from not knowing where you can push them and what you can squeeze out of them, where you can fight against certain things. They don't necessarily need exclusivity and all these rights. So that's where our experience is key. We know what's important to these guys and where you can hold back and where you can squeeze them. Speed is key with any negotiation. As a distributor, we need to make sure that that process is as sweet as possible so they want to work with us again. If it's a real nightmare, then you're probably not going to get another offer. What I said here, consider your wider strategy, be smart with your counters. You probably don't want to get into a huge swathe of back and forth, counter-offer, counter-offer, counter-offer. It's messy, and it's just delay, and delay kills a deal. So think about what's important to you and think about your priorities. Is part of your strategy that you need to get the eyeballs elsewhere? In which case, maybe you don't push back on the fee so much, but you do push back on the exclusivity and on the holdbacks. Think about, I'm saying it like it's you, but that's what you've got to think about. What is important and what was your strategy at the start? If your strategy is to just get the most amount of money from this one territory because you don't really see any other avenues in that territory for this show, then push for as much cash as you can and give them whatever they want. And make sure every pushback is justified. You'll have this when you're negotiating yourselves. There's nothing worse than when someone says, no, we can't agree to that. They don't tell you why. Everything should have a reason behind it. There should be a justification behind why you're pushing against something. And the last point is that everything should be a win-win. You never want one party to end a negotiation feeling shortchanged. Once you get past that stage, you get onto the contract stage. Again, this should be quick. You want to get through this as quickly as possible because, again, if this takes ages and you're difficult and you're fighting them on every point, they're not going to do a deal with you again. So this part of it, again, would be handled directly between us as the distributor, as the sales agent, and between the buyer. And again, I'm going to come onto it a little bit later, but that is why it's so crucial for you guys to have trust in us and why that relationship is so imperative, because we are now legally responsible for giving your show to somebody else, and you need to have the trust in us that we've got the expertise and that we've got the care for you guys and the respect for you guys, that we're looking after it and we're putting everything in place to protect you where we can. It's always helpful to know the little traps and little tricks that they'll try and put in. I think if you're doing deals with these broadcasters, it's so easy to be caught out. And like Ken said, some of these first-time producers, they will get the lawyer that did their house to look at the contract, which is crazy. If they're not experienced in looking at television broadcast contracts, then they're not the right person to do it. You can't skimp on that. Make sure that it's somebody who knows the pitfalls of the industry, who knows what to look out for, and also knows what's just fairly standard. There's nothing worse than sending your contract back to the buyer and everything is redlined. You know your deal is going to take so long. So that is pretty much the contracting stage. Some people it's easy, some people it's not. Depending on what stage your show is at, the difference between this phase and this phase could be quite a while. If you're in development, likely it will be quite a while. But if you're ready and you're ready to go, this can be straight away. And again, the delivery process is all handled by us as the distributor. Part of the benefit of using a distributor is that we take all of that work off of you guys. We've already got the video files in-house. We will have done that when we're making our agreement together. And it's our job to send it to the client as per their spec, using our own portal, or if it takes a lot of work to transcode to their spec, then we'll go out of house. But it's also our job to deliver the supporting documents, the scripts, the music cue sheets, and getting all that in-house will be a huge part of that initial phase of agreeing a distribution agreement together. We're going to tell you what we need and get everything in-house before we're even ready to even whisper it to a buyer. Everything's got to be there. And then the final step, the nice step, is getting paid, collecting the cash. Again, that's something that's handled by us. So we, as a distributor, would invoice the buyer directly, and we would take in the payment, and then you guys get paid in royalties, minus the percentage that we get in commission, which was agreed at the start. And that is pretty much the whole process. Any questions on that before we move on? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Ken pulled on it earlier, but we're always looking for 26 half hours. It's becoming increasingly hard to get that in the current world. It's so much harder to get a show made. Ideally, that's what we want, and that's what broadcasters want. That's where it comes from, right? It's really tough to sell a show where we're saying to them, it's 11 episodes now, maybe if we get more deals, it's 52 in the future. That's such a difficult sell. So ideally, yeah, it's 26 half hours. At a minimum, 13 half hours. It's going to be really tough to sell something that's less than that. A different pitch can be, if there's only going to be 10 episodes ready immediately, you've only got the budget for 10, we would still probably pitch it as a 52, but here's the 10, but it's a 52 series. So hopefully that answers your question. I know it's not always the answer that people want to hear, particularly first-timers who are scraping together the money to make one episode, right? But that is the reality. These guys, if you think particularly on the linear landscape, they might want to show an episode every day. They probably want to show 2 episodes every day. If it's an 11-minuter, they would put 2 back-to-back in a half-hour slot, which comes up with your 22-minute half-hour, which is what we use in the industry. If you've got 10 episodes, it's 5 days. You really need the longevity. You need the volume. Otherwise, it's not going to happen, is the reality. Any other questions about the process? Yeah.
Hello. Hi, Toby. I wanted to ask about what you mentioned about the time duration and the number of episodes. Considering that comes from the broadcasting side of things, also talking about how OTT has had a boom right now, like Netflix, Amazon, etc. So what is the difference between those two, and how does it sell on each platform? And is broadcasting still as popular as it used to be?
Absolutely not, which is what I'll come on to in the next slide, actually. But you ask about formats and how that changes if you're talking to an OTT versus talking to a linear player. You are dead right. On the SVOD side, format is kind of less important. There's not these kind of blocks that you've got to fit into. You don't have to fit so much into their rules, but you've got to be careful when you're doing that. It's totally feasible now, and there's so much more scope to be creative with formats now. You can have as many minutes as you want, really. You can have 64 minutes. 60 times 4. That is not a. It's really up to you. What I would be wary of is you don't just want to make an OTT show. This is from my perspective as a global distributor. You don't want to cut out half the players, right? Because if you've got a weird format, I've seen ones before where the episodes are different lengths, which is that's a no straight away for any broadcaster. That's really tricky. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot early doors with your format. But you're dead right. If it is a show that it's an SVOD show, then you can be a bit creative. But I think the industry hasn't quite caught up to that point yet. It's still expected that it's 11 minutes or 7 minutes or 22s. It's these weirder formats are creeping in, but it's not huge. You've still got to kind of fit into those little boxes for the time being. Who knows what it'll be like in a few years? I mean, it's ever changing, but that's kind of the way it is right now. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Hi, Toby. One question on this process. Actually, two, but I'll ask them really quickly. So the first is you were mentioning the theatrical release thing yesterday. So do you want to speak a little bit about that? Or like today you covered all the OTT and paid TV and unpaid. So maybe that. And the second thing is, how early on is it advisable to get a distributor on board? Like you're looking for co-producers, is it advisable to get it at the same time, or you wait till some amount of development is done?
Yeah, both good questions. The first one I can answer pretty quickly. If you've got a movie and you want it to have a theatrical release, we're not the guys for you. That's a totally different area of distribution, is to get a theatrical distributor involved. So you'd want to make those connections and get those people in place. It's not something that any of us on the Jetpack team have any idea how to do. I mean, we can always put you in touch. I mean, that's the benefit of going through guys like us. Oh, Ken. Ken's pointed, yeah. But Ken can back up. It's a totally different world. So that's kind of the first piece. The second one is much harder, of when is it the right time to get a distributor in place. As a rule, we can look at it from any stage. But to be brutally honest, right now in the current landscape, if all you've got is a pitch deck and no funding and nothing else, the best you're probably going to get out of us is feedback. We really need to see it, and at least to have a vision that you could get this made. You don't need to have all the pieces in place, but we need to have confidence that you have the hustle and you have the connections and you know how to get this funded. It's such a difficult thing when people come to us and they've got an amazing show, but they've got zero. It's so difficult with the distribution piece to make everything fall in line there. It's the reality. But we do have an in-house acquisitions team, and we've got a development team with Matt and with Jilly, so we're more than happy to give as much feedback as we can. We get a lot of shows, so we've got to prioritize the ones that are further developed is the reality. But we will look at everything in terms of what's the right timing. It's hard to say, but it's when we feel that there's a show that is on the right track to being made, and all that's left for us to do is to maybe fill the gaps. So, anybody else? Or yeah.
You distribute only episodes, or you distribute the mobile apps?
Just television content, just content. Yeah, we don't distribute games or apps or anything like that. It's a tool. It's a great point. The broadcasters will be grateful for anything that you can support them with, whether that's your own marketing or whether that is games. To bring up Moley earlier, that we had, the producers took it upon themselves. They're not making a lot of cash out of it, but to have a mole-y version of Roblox, where you play as a little mole and you design your own guy, and he wanders around Mole Town, and that's a huge pitching point. And you bring that up. I always put it near the end of a pitch, because you think they were liking this bit, and then bam, you hit them with that at the end. They realize that, they're not just thinking in terms of content here. This is something else. There's potential here for this to be bigger than just a show, because that's what it needs to be now in this world. Kids are on so many devices and so many different mediums. You need to have a hit, you need to permeate every area of their world.
Hi, Toby.
Hi.
What I want to know is, like, let's say, like, you're being like the bridge between like the producer and let's say like the OTT or the platform. So do you expect like the team, the producer to like come with the data? So why this product, let's say, is going to work in the market now or when? Or do you like do you do your own research, or do you have your own set of data to add, like, let's say, like, add to it before you meet a platform?
It's less data-driven and more experience-driven, I would say. The part of the seller and the role of the distributor is to know your market. Yeah, data comes into that. You can always look at the figures, broadcaster by broadcaster or platform by platform, and see what performs really well, and that is what informs you of what to bring to them and what the potential for is in the market. In terms of, would we expect you to bring that? No. It's kind of what I was saying earlier, right? It's the, excuse me, I'll put that on silent. It's kind of that piece of, we don't expect you to have the expertise. That's why we exist, right? It's, you're there to create this amazing show with all this potential worldwide, and it's our job to see that potential. It's our job to have the information and to know our buyers well enough and to know our markets well enough. That's so much of our job is to make sure that we know these territories inside out. We've done our research, and a lot of that comes from just talking to the buyers. A big part of my meetings will be, again, asking the right questions. What are you doing now? Last time you said your strategy was this and this and this. Any changes in that? What's going on with the landscape? Have you noticed anything about? Because they want to have that conversation. These are people in the industry, and these are interesting topics. So don't be afraid, even as producers, like, to have that conversation with the buyers. They are your greatest source of knowledge. If you can get yourself in front of them, it just comes down to have that conversation. There's nothing worse than kind of, you think you've got a meeting and you think, right, we've got to make the most of every second here. You launch into your show, you haven't even said hello, and you've launched right in. Have a dialogue and ask them questions, learn about them, learn what works and what doesn't work, and then hopefully they've said something that, because it all comes down to pitching, right? It all comes down to getting your show off. So hopefully they've said something that you can latch on then. A good thing is, say, with the PJ Masks example earlier, if we've got Talking Tom and we're saying, you've got PJ Masks, right? How's it working? Either answer works. They say terribly, we say, well, here's why Talking Tom is different, because it's comedy-led. PJ Masks didn't work. I think this cuts because it makes kids laugh. They say, yeah, PJ Masks is working amazingly. Well, here's something in a similar space, since that's working, but it's slightly different. Here's the tweaks to it, and here's why it's different, and here's why it's unique, and here's why it could work alongside. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing you always want to get across.
Thank you so much. I have one doubt here. Let's say content is ready. So should we broadcast in YouTube or OTT? Will it reduce its value when we come to you?
It's a really good question. Yes and no. It all comes back to that kind of first slide of the strategy. If the strategy with a show and the right way to go is eyeballs everywhere, then it's not such a big deal that it started on YouTube. It can be a great platform to build an audience, right? And it can be a great pitching tool to say, like, you go into a specific territory, and YouTube is great because it will tell you how many views you have in a specific territory. So you can go to India, you can go to ETV, and you can say, this is a smash on YouTube in India, and that's a great pitching tool. But that can work against you in reality.
Yeah, that's what actually I'm thinking. If already it is broadcast, everyone knows, then why broadcaster will come and buy it again? Where they will publish broadcast?
There's a big part of it that's like, think about kids and think about viewership patterns. Very rarely does a kid want to go out and explore something new. They watch what they see around them everywhere. If they've seen it on YouTube, they'll go on Netflix and they'll watch it. They will watch what they love. They watch what has permeated their world. So that non-exclusive model of having it everywhere, it's not just on YouTube, it's on AVOD, it's on these fast channels that are popping up now, it's on a broadcaster. That can be a really good strategy, and that is something that more and more people are kind of open to now. There used to be a time when these guys would be very, very protective about the show, and you end up kind of shooting yourself in the foot almost, because the best way to grow the audience is to have it everywhere. And it kind of feeds each other, right? If they've seen it on linear, they'll watch it on YouTube. If they watch it on YouTube, they'll watch it on an SVOD. Does that kind of answer your question?
So I was just going to say, in terms of that, time is a great thing in your side, strangely, because,
Sorry. So I was saying time is actually a good thing, passing, because over time those rights become free, or they can open up more. So you might have a deal where there's an exclusive period of 3 years, but after that, then it becomes non-exclusive. To your question about YouTube, so that our Tom Gates series is on YouTube. It's the second largest market for us of all our YouTube viewings. And I've come to India specifically to talk about it with broadcasters and partners. And one of the things I say is, it sold over 1 million books in India, and it sold 200,000 last year alone, and it's our second highest YouTube market outside of the UK. The great thing about YouTube is you can switch off. So if a broadcaster says, I want to be the exclusive platform in India, we can go, sure, click, now you are. Or we can switch it back on again. Or we can sort of have language versions, and so on and so on and so on. So there's a lot of flexibility around that, and it's a negotiation. So some buyers will pay you an exclusive fee to be exclusive. Others will just say, no, we can't afford that. And to Toby's point about negotiating, that's what it's all about. Time, money, exclusivity, and as many kids watching your program as you can possibly get worldwide.
Yeah, it's a great point. And yeah, like Ken says, that is the beauty of YouTube. You can switch it off. There are broadcasters that will take a big issue with it, and that could be a deal breaker, but you can jump on that straight away and say, it'll be gone by tomorrow. So YouTube is not such a kind of, it's not such a deal breaker really, but yeah, you've got to be careful, because it can upset certain people if they specifically want premiere in the market, particularly if it's a brand new show they're really excited about, and they find out that, yeah, you launched on YouTube in their territory a couple of months ago. That could potentially kill a little bit of the excitement, because particularly broadcasters, they get really excited about, they want to be the first guys to launch this thing, and they'll pay more for the premiere. So yeah, I would make that point as well. But YouTube is a fabulous tool for growing your audience, and we use it a lot. Talking Tom, as I said, is a huge tool for YouTube, a huge property for YouTube, and we use them as a kind of, with our partnership with Outfit 7, who makes Talking Tom, they help us with other shows, right? If there's a show that is kind of struggling to find an audience on YouTube, we use Talking Tom as a hub channel. And now we've got Dennis the Menace, Dennis and Yasha, I should say now, up on YouTube on the Talking Tom hub channel, because it's for a similar audience type, similar style of storytelling, and a similar style of animation. So it's, you know, there's connections in who the audience will be there, so they think they've just finished watching Talking Tom, and maybe they'll click on Dennis the Menace. And that's what you can do, really, with YouTube. That's the power. And it's a great pitching tool, more than anything else. Any other questions? Yeah?
Have you sold any Indian content till now?
I don't think, no. I think there may be one show where we had an Indian co-production partner. I think Symbiosis was the studio on our show, Oswaldo, which was made mainly out of Brazil, but I think Symbiosis was the Indian partner. Apart from that, we have no Indian content in our slate, so it'd be something that I'd really love to add.
And how the global market sees as an Indian content thing actually? Because when we create a TV series or anything, we create it with the Indian mythology and all things. How the global market sees our mythology and style, what they see as actually? Any idea?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it's the endless debate, right? How do you make the show that you want to make, which is about your history, and it's about the mythology, and it's about India, and it's celebrating all that's amazing about your history, but also make it a show that will work on a global stage. And that is the thing that you're going to have to contend with. It's how you give it that Indian flavor while also still making it universally entertaining. It's not a rule, a universal rule, but I would always come back to comedy. Comedy transcends all borders. If you can make your show genuinely hilarious, everyone's going to love it. And it's the hardest thing to nail is comedy. You can get away with so much if you've got a funny show. The stories can be rubbish, the designs can be rubbish. Not rubbish, we shouldn't use that word, but you know what I mean? They can be of a lesser quality, but if it's genuinely funny and you've got that lightning in the bottle thing where you've just got it, that transcends everything. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges. It's always going to be a struggle if you're trying to educate about a certain culture and you're trying to educate about a certain history. You are going to limit who's going to want to pick that up if you're making it overtly educational about one specific country or one specific culture. It's just the reality of the market. But if you succeed in that piece of making it genuinely entertaining, then you're onto a winner, really. It's that marriage of making the show that you want.
A lot of broadcasters say, like, some people, I know some IP guys, when they decide or when they tried some episodes, they say, like, okay, you don't need to make a blue color, you don't make this color, that color. You don't bring your Indian content over here, make it a global market kind of a thing, actually. So,
sorry, could you say your question again to make sure I understand?
Yeah, when we do some entertainment stuff, actually, they say like, okay, it is too much Indian-y style, Indian characterization.
Okay, yeah. I mean, listen, that's what you come up against, right? It's you've got to make the show that you want to make. I think you've got a vision and you've got you've got this idea. You've got to decide who it's for. Is it for a local market? Is it for a global market? And if you want to make it for a global market, you might have to make certain sacrifices. But if this is the show you want to make and that's what you want to do, then then you can do that and you're free to do that. But it's all about what your vision is and how you want it to come off, really. Sadly, there is this kind of bigotry in the market where if broadcasters think, oh, that kid doesn't look like the kids in my territory, they won't watch it, which I think kids don't see race, colour, culture, but you've got to remember we're pitching to adults, right? Who you've got to get past that barrier first. But that is where, I mean, again, the YouTube thing, right, is Beam, huge on YouTube. And in so many territories, we had Mighty Little Beam for a while, which was amazing in the States on Netflix. It was like the biggest show for that age group in America, in the States. So the pitch for that immediately becomes anyone who says to you, yeah, we're not sure, is it got too much of a kind of Indian look? You can straight away point to the data and say, the American kids don't think so, this territory doesn't think so, this territory doesn't think so. So there's ways around it. I hope that we're going to get better one day at representation and having different characters on screen. I think we're getting there. I think it's a slow process. You've got the likes, we talked with the BBC, I don't know when it was, maybe 6 months ago, and they said they want to show stories of different backgrounds and different cultures, and then we show them shows with different backgrounds, different cultures, and they say no. So it's finding that balance of injecting it with what makes it special to you and what makes it unique, but also making it kind of palatable for the people that aren't quite ready, right? That would be my answer. Again, not a straightforward one. I think we haven't got too much longer left. So, I mean, if anybody has any other questions, I did have a little bit more to say, but I'm going to put my email on the screen. No, I'm not. Maybe I'm not. I'm not. Give me a second. I'll try and figure it out. Find me afterwards, and And yeah, we can exchange details and any questions that you have about anything we can cover. Yeah, use me. I can't promise I'll know the answers to everything. Maybe some things, more production, financing, I'll refer to Ken, or I can refer to other people in Jetpack. But we're here to help. Thanks very much. I hope this has been some information there that you can take away and can help you in your pitches and going forward. And best of luck to everyone in the room who's got a show that they're trying to make happen. And hopefully graphics can be a starting point and a tool to getting where you want to be. So thanks very much.